Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video. My name is Miguel Villalpando. I am the program coordinator for Imperial MESA, and on this video we'll go over CSS in more in depth. We'll also go over some colors, and at the end we'll figure out how to add a image to the background. Okay. Friendly reminder, like every other video I've done, this is our website, so check it out. Check out to see if there's new announcements or anything like that. Right over here, if you guys can see, we have the rules, so remember to register for the rules. We will post a deadline on our social media, and we'll send out emails to your teachers regarding the deadline for registration. And then right over here onto the left, we have the instructional videos. Also, we do have Zoom meetings Mondays and Tuesdays. For you to get in touch and get the link, send me an email. Here's my email. I just highlighted it. Here's a portion of it. Send me an email with your name, school, and grade. That way I can send you a link. If not, then ask your teacher for the link. These Zoom meetings are pretty much all about Q&A. You guys have questions, I'm right there to answer them. So remember to be on time. It starts at 2 p.m. every Mondays and Tuesdays, and they're weekly. So yeah, you can come join in and ask me any questions you guys want. Okay, so let's get started into this week's pretty much CSS. Okay, so on last video, pretty much we went over, we just started going over CSS. Pretty much what I have right here is the file that I used for the previous video. We did very minimum. We changed the headers. So we changed the color of the headers. Right now we have pretty much like a little pinkish reddish color. We changed the font of it to Arial. We also changed the color of the paragraphs to pretty much this color, which is around purple. There you go. And then we changed the font of the body right over there, Arial. Then we have some other ones just in case the browser doesn't render it. So what I left off last week is pretty much that. Very simple CSS. Nothing super complicated. I didn't go over a lot of stuff necessary to understand CSS fully. Just remember that CSS are rules that HTML has to follow, and they're pretty much very easy. You necessarily don't need a lot to write a CSS rule, pretty much. Okay, so what we're going to start with is in case you want to use internal CSS. So by that I mean whenever we're using external CSS, we'll be linking the CSS file that we have right over here into our HTML. So what we've done last video, we pretty much linked it, and that's what we're doing right now. As you guys can see, that is the line that we've used, the line of code that we've used in order to link that that CSS to our HTML. Now, for some reason, you want to use internal CSS, meaning you don't want to have an outside file being linked into your HTML in order to pretty much render the CSS for any other X amount of reasons. So what we're gonna do is pretty much I'm gonna delete this part, and this part of it goes under head. So all this stuff that we're writing pretty much has to go under head, and for the internal CSS we definitely do need to write it under head. So just leave everything else, erase the link, and ignore pretty much what we have right over here for this file, and we're gonna start writing pretty much our HTML. Okay, so this one would be pretty much style. Again, our opening tag, and then our closing. I like to write my closing first, that way I don't forget. And there you go. In between, what I'm gonna write is pretty much my CSS. But even before that, right on top, I have to type in what type of file, or pretty much the CSS that we're using for this. Okay, so we go ahead and write that down, which is text slash CSS. There you go. And we're ready to start our CSS. So right here, we're pretty much going to write any CSS that we can think of. I'm going to write some stuff down that I feel like we're going to go over in some other videos about CSS. So we're going to do this one, which we went over, which is font family, and press, oops, right, font family, and then we're going to write Arial, close it. We're going to press enter, and we're going to do a background color. Okay, so that is pretty much how we write down a background color. And then for this one, we're actually going to use, we're going to talk more about different ways to start writing colors. This is one of the ways, RGB. Most of you have probably heard about it. It's red, green, blue. We use those types of colors in order to figure out the exact hue that we want to. So for this one, we start with the parentheses, and then we go ahead and write 85, comma, 179, comma, 175, and then we close our CSS. Okay, and then we're going to write another rule for the CSS. This one is going to be for the header, for the first header. Okay, and we're also going to be writing another one very soon. So this one's going to be for the header. Again, open it up, and this one we're just going to pretty much use color. And then again, we're going to use RGB, and then open our parentheses, and we're going to write 255, comma, 255, comma, 255, and then we're going to close it, and there we go. Okay, so once we click run, that should be our new CSS rule right here on to the right. Okay, so what we just did right now is pretty much very simple CSS. If you want to write internally the CSS just like I did right there and work on just one file instead of having several files for or just one plain CSS, then this would be the right way to go, unless you want to have all the other files, all the other pages pretty much the same. That would be for external CSS. It would be a lot easier to write the link of each of the CSS instead of writing every single rule just like what I did, or copy and pasting, make sure it's right. It's a lot easier to do that if you have multiple pages, but if you have one off page just like this one, let's say you have different colors or anything like that, then this one will be perfect way to start. You can use definitely internal CSS, or if you just want to play around and figuring out which CSS rule applies and works well with your website. Okay, so as you guys can see on the body, we used the font Arial. So everything from here and down, it's the type font Arial. And for the header, for the first header, we are going to use this color. So that's where this one came off too. But if we see right here, our second header is pretty much non-existent. Okay, so we have to figure out what we have to do in order to add this one to it. So what we can do is, my bad, going to H1 right here, there's already a rule, and write H2. Okay, press run, and there you go. So what I did right there is I added the second header into that one rule just by adding one comma, space, and the actual header that I want to use. Then it popped up and it worked perfectly. So what we have right here is a gray background, white lettering, black lettering for the body and for the paragraphs. If I want to be a little bit more specific, I can definitely use a different color for this. So it works out pretty much. But this is one way to do it, CSS internally. Okay, so if you're testing it out, working on some other stuff, then definitely this works out perfectly. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna talk a little bit more about CSS. Okay, so I'm gonna move on into another file. So now this file, I just made it up right now. This was actually one for the Zoom meetings. Someone needed help, so I pretty much just filled it in and added the stuff that we were going to go over right now. Okay, so what I did is I'm going right now into my CSS file and I added several rules. Okay, so now the reason why I added the rules right here like this, and if you guys can see my HTML, I added some stuff, some stuff that actually works well with this, and I'll go over why I did this. So the reason why I did this is because whenever we're looking at CSS, if there's more than 2 or more rules that apply to the same element, it's important to understand which one will take precedence. Okay, so the last rule, so pretty much we talk about the last rule right there. If the 2 selectors are identical, okay, the latter of the 2 will take precedence. Okay, so here we can see that we have the second I. So right over here we have this one right here on line 7, and then on line 10. Okay, pretty much the second one on line 10 takes precedence. Okay, so that's the one that's going to take charge of, and this is the one that's going to be rendered. Instead of having green, we're going to have red, just like what we have right there. Okay, and then we also have to talk about being specific. We have to specify if one of the selectors is more specific than the other, the more specific rule will take precedence over the general ones. Okay, so if we look at this, H1 right over here on line 4 is more specific than what we have right here on line 1, which is the asterisk. The asterisk pretty much means everything in general, the whole thing on the file. That's what the asterisk means. If we want to be a little bit more specific, we can use H1. If we want to look at the P for paragraph, this one right over here, PB. So this one right here will be talking about the paragraph, and to be a little bit more specific, we're talking about the bold of the actual paragraph on this one. Is actually a little bit more specific than just writing P right over here. Okay, and And then we also have another specific one right here, which this one stands for P hashtag intro. And as you guys can see, the little pop-up that just came up right there, that's one way to ID specific parts of the HTML. So I know I didn't talk over this one. This is one way, and that's the reason why I wanted to introduce it this way, so you guys can have a visual of how CSS works and why we need to identify pretty much the name of several little elements in our HTML. So for the paragraph, I ID'd it and I just pretty much do intro. So on my CSS, I would have to go back and write right here one of the rules, and how you write it is pretty much P hashtag intro. Simple as that. And then it will pretty much render the font size right there. Okay, so and then we also have to identify the important. So you can definitely add what I have right here on line 17, the exclamation mark, and then important. Okay, after any property value to indicate that it should be considered more important than any other rule that applies to the same element. Okay, so that's one way to pretty much put this one to the front and saying that this is the one that's going to render first, and this is the one that's the most important out of every other ones of the same piece for paragraphs. Okay, so we go back over here, and then we looked. It's very simple. I just wrote down, whatever, but the only thing that we're looking at is pretty much how it's going to render. Okay, based on all that I just told you, if we look right here on the top, we have our header, our first header. That's pretty much going to be how it's going to render. So it didn't render this one right here. That's the font, but so it went into the second, which is monospace. Okay, so monospace is pretty much just how we type with coding that same font. As you guys can see, it's right over here too. And then we go down, and then because what I did is I pretty much bolded my name, Minero Villalpando, right over there. So it's, oh, my bad, I italicize it. It rendered it red. And we go back to our CSS. The italicized shouldn't be green, but it should be red. So if I deleted this red, then it turns green. If I added another different color, then it does this one. If I switch these two, have the green here and the red on top, it will render the green first, just like I told you guys. We also have the bold. So now here's the bold one. I bolded program coordinator. So we look at bold, and this one, render it blue. Okay, now remember this one right here, could have also done it in pink, but because we're being a little bit more specific, it's going to be rendered in blue. And that one we also did important, so that one should take precedence with every other one aside from this one. Okay, now the font size, it's 100 for the top one, for the first paragraph, because that one we actually name it intro, and that's how it shows right over here, and that's the name of the paragraph that I've done. And the rest should be 75% of it, and that's how it renders right over here. So that's what we have to take into account whenever we're looking at CSS, how we write it, where it should be written. If we're not being too specific, if we're not being specific at all, we should definitely be specific, naming paragraphs, IDing using this hashtag, obviously ID equals, and then the name of whatever you want to call it, but just make sure you write it properly during the CSS. Okay, now we'll go over a little bit with the background color. So now we go back into this one. Okay, so this one is my CSS. So I'm gonna run it, and there you go. So now the CSS I have right now, currently I don't have anything right there, but what I'm gonna do is we're gonna talk over the color. So there's pretty much three foregrounds of color, you want to call them. So it allows you pretty much be specific to the color of the text or inside the element. Okay, so we do have RGB values, just like I explained right there. So these ones express colors in terms of how much red, green, and blue are used. And so on the previous ones, just like what we did right there, you will do 255, 255, 255 to have pretty much white. The next one we can talk about is the hex codes. Now these ones are 6-digit codes. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is we're going to do a list, and we're going to go over some very simple CSS again. So we're going to go over body, space, our brackets, and then we're going to do background, color, and then we're going to do RGB, open our parentheses, and we're going to go with 200, comma 200, comma 200, and then we're going to close it, and that is how we write pretty much using RGB values. Okay, remember red, green, and then blue, how much green it is. So I'll render that one right after we're done with explaining hex codes. Okay, so now hex codes pretty much follow as pretty much 6-digit codes that represent the amount of red, green, and blue in a color. Okay, and usually proceeds with a pound or hashtag sign. Okay, so now we're actually gonna write down another rule. So we're gonna start with my bad, H1. I'll open our brackets. Next thing we do is we write down background color, and then again we're gonna do our hex code, which is a 6-digit code with a hashtag. Okay, and this one is pretty much be hashtag EE3E8. Okay, and now the good thing about it is if you guys see this, what the cool thing about this is that it tells us pretty much the color of this. Okay, next we're gonna start writing pretty much the other one, which would be just color names. And we've done that in the past for the other ones. We talked about green, blue, and all this stuff. So this one we're gonna go with H2 space brackets, and then we're gonna do background color, and then we're just gonna write down pretty much dark cayenne. Okay, and there we go. Obviously we have to end it with that, and then also the top one always end it with the semicolon. And we go over here, and we're gonna do with P. Okay, and this one is pretty much just so that we can actually see the lettering of this. We're gonna go over here. I'm gonna write down background color, and then we're gonna just write white. Okay, Then we close it. And there you go. Now we look at our HTML, and our HTML and CSS are linked. So we can see right there. Press run, and there you have it. So these ones are pretty much how it's going to render. We didn't write any subheadings or right there. So the subheadings are right there. We didn't write that. The paragraphs should be there. So pretty much that's how it's going to render. Okay, so we have our first paragraph, our first header. The background of it is pretty much gray. We have the subheadings right over there, and pretty much the paragraphs. So that's how it's going to render, and that would be a very good CSS. We can play around with more and add way more stuff if we need to. Okay. So now the next thing we're actually gonna do is we're gonna talk about adding background images. Okay. So bear with me. We're gonna use the same backgrounds that we've used, and this one is pretty easy. Okay. There's nothing difficult to write down. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna erase all this stuff because we really don't need any of this stuff. Okay, we render it, and it pretty much erased everything. Okay, now to make it a lot simple, that's why I erased it. Now the next thing I have to do is write down my rule where my picture I want it. So I want it between pretty much the body. That's where all the good stuff is. Anyway, so I'll pretty much press that, enter, and now we have the brackets in there. And then we go with background image. Okay, space. And then right over here we write down URL. And then we write down our parentheses and our quotation marks. And now right over here we're gonna write down pretty much our pretty much our address for the specific image. And for this one, I'm gonna use this one. It's very easy. And remember, I told you guys, just copy the link, make it a lot easier for you guys. It's a lot easier, less mistakes and all that stuff. Paste, and remember, we really don't need anything before the hashtag, so erase all that stuff, and the only thing that we need is all of that. Okay, and definitely don't forget the semicolon. Press that, and there you go. That is pretty much how you add a background to your image, to your website. Now, it really depends on how well rendered it is and where is it positioned in there. This one, obviously, it's being repeated multiple times horizontally. And on the next video, we'll go over more stuff on how to fix this, how to play around with the background. We'll go over more of borders and more CSS rules. And we'll play around with all that stuff using CSS. Okay, so pretty much this rounds up for this video. I don't want to keep it longer. I know this is usually 23 minutes long. This one went up to like 30 minutes. So I hope everyone understood this. I went a little too fast, but there's a lot of information that we had to go over. If anyone has any problems whatsoever, feel free to email me. Again, my email is in the website. It's right over here. You can contact us through Facebook, email, Instagram. That's my email. You can also email us using this the website where right over here under contact. So definitely reach us out if you need any help. Okay. Again, you guys, my name is Mineo Vilpando. I'm the program coordinator, and thank you for listening.